Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to give you an update on my Amaryllis plants here. So these are just starting to come out of dormancy, starting to go into growth, so we should have some flowers on them soon. But I just wanted to give you guys an update, tell you how they've been doing, and I need to do a little bit of repotting on one of them because I've got some issues with one of them. So the first one here is my youngest one. This was actually an offshoot from this plant here. This one basically had a little baby coming up, so I removed that, transplanted the baby into here, and it flowered for the first time last year, which I was quite surprised actually because it was quite a young plant. But now it's got another new shoot here. You can see it's got a nice flower shoot there. It's also got a bit of a leaf starting to grow as well. You can tell if it's a flower shoot or a leaf if you look very carefully at the top there. The top of the leaf is just like a nice kind of point to it, a nice curved point. And the top of the flower shoot has a little notch in the very top, so you know it's the flower shoot. But also it's a lot thicker as well. But when you first see it coming up, it's a notch that gives it away, and then later on it's quite obvious when you've got a much thicker stem where the flower shoot is. So that one's doing well. I was tempted to repot it, but it's a bit late now because it started to come into growth. So I'll repot this next year. It will need it by then because it's starting to get quite large. You can also see a lot of the compost here is starting to get pushed up out of the pot. And that happens when the bulb gets bigger, it swells. There's no space for the compost to go, so it just goes upwards. And that's a sign that it needs repotting soon. But that's doing quite well. I'll leave this sticking just for a bit of support if when the flower stem comes up. It might be a bit leggy. Same with this one. This is why I got these two bamboo canes here. That's to help it so that when the flower gets really large, it doesn't fall over. And this one actually did have an infection for a while, but that's completely cleared up. You can't really see where that was. That infection was caused by the removal of the baby plant from it. It just opened a wound and let infection in. This one quite often has two flower spikes on it. So far there's one coming up. This is this one here. There is also some leaves coming up as well, but I can't see any signs yet of a second flower spike, but quite often they come at different times. They sometimes do flower at the same time with two flower spikes, but often they're staged, one after the other. So when one's finished, another one then comes up. And then this is what the Amaryllis I'm having some problems with. It didn't flower last year. Also, last year the leaves only grew about this long, whereas these ones, they grow about a foot or two, the leaves normally. And so I'm thinking the problem with this one is actually, I think it might be something to do with the neck. It's too congested, the flower can't come out. The last time this flower, I think, was 2 years ago, and that flower, when it did come out, the stem wasn't straight. It was all kind of like zigzaggy. It looked like it had been compressed and was struggling to come out. So I think there's something wrong here with it's too compacted. It can't get any growth out. So I'm probably just going to cut the top off this, replant it in new compost, because these two have both been repotted, but this one hasn't. And I'll see how the bulb's looking. So to start with, I'll just get rid of all the loose material. So I'll do that on all the plants. You don't want to rip off the loose material if it's stuck on really well. So if it's loose like that, just pull it off. That will improve the appearance of the plant, just make it look a bit nicer. Especially as they get older, you start ending up having loads of this kind of horrible material on it. So it's nice to just tidy it up every now and again. But if it does feel stuck and it's not pulling off easily, just leave it, because you can do more harm than good. If you rip it off, you can cause a bit of rot to set in, because if you damage the bulb down here and it gets damp, then it's quite easy for the bulb to start rotting. So only take off what is loose material. So that's all the loose material now removed, and as you can see, it does look quite a lot neater now, a lot fresher. You don't really need to go right down to the green flesh. It's fine if you leave some brown. It's quite good actually, because it helps protect the plant from a bit of sunshine. So don't go overly zealous and rip all of the brown material off. Just anything that's loose and it seems to be already peeling away. If it's held on tight like these ones here, just leave them. So now I'm going to go ahead and try and deal with this plant. So I'll see how the roots are looking. So it should just pop out fairly simply, like that. And it has been in this pot for many years, so actually I need to break off these old roots and replace the compost. So I'm just going to start loosening it up, teasing away the old compost, and then I can start putting in some new compost once the old has been removed. And the time to do this is whilst the plant is dormant. The Amaryllis don't really like their roots getting disturbed too much. A lot of bulbs, when they die back, the roots also die off as well, and all you have left is the bulb. But with Amaryllis, the roots tend to stay alive even though the rest of the plant has died back. When you replant it, it's not like a normal bulb where it will just grow new roots. It will also have its existing roots. So if you can, it's best not to repot these too often, as every time you repot them, you are disturbing the roots. So that's all most of the loose compost now. What tends to happen with Amaryllis is the roots just grow down and they don't ever grow up, so you have quite a lot of missing space. A lot of space around the bulb where there's no actual roots. And as I'm doing this, I can actually feel a slight hollow in this side of the bulb, which isn't a good sign. So there might have been a bit of rot at some point. That might be causing some of the issues that we've got. So I'll start peeling off some of this brown material as well and see what's underneath. Because this is years worth, and if there's a lot of it, it can actually hold a bit of moisture as well and cause the bulb to rot if there's excessive amounts like there is here. Now there's quite a lot of old compost as well, and roots, so I'm going to try and tease that out the bottom. Try not to damage too many roots, but there's a lot of old roots that need to come off of here, and these old roots aren't going to be are actually dead, and they're not going to provide any nutrition for the plant. They're just going to be in the way of any new roots. And using my secateurs, I'm going to have a look, and most of these look like they're dead, so I'm going to start cutting off these old dead roots and come back to a healthy root plane. I will be cutting through some healthy roots in this as well, so the plant won't be the happiest after this, but it will grow plenty of new roots, so it's certainly not the end of the world for the plant. So that's the root plate there. As you can see, there tends to be a ring of roots around the outside, and the plant will keep growing new ones. The middle tends to stay empty. This is quite a thick root plate. I think it's quite an old plant. The root plates are normally much higher up, but as the bulb has grown, the bulb has gone upwards and the old bits of bulb have died off. The root plates stayed quite low down. But that's most of the old dead ones taken off. You can see there's a few new ones starting to grow, so it's just starting to come out of dormancy. But generally most of these were dead or not very healthy roots. You can tell they're all kind of shriveled up and weren't looking too good. So I'm going to put it in some new compost now. I'm also going to site it slightly higher up. This was just the depth that it was buried in originally when it first came in this pot. And although it's good to have stability with the bulbs, so that if they're buried up to here, just up to the neck, that's where I would normally recommend burying an Amaryllis, or just slightly lower, around about here. And that gives it good stability, so even if it has a big flower, it doesn't fall over. But the problem with that is if you have a small pot such as this one here, ideally you would have a larger pot than this, but because I like these looking quite nice, I keep them in this kind of ornamental golden pot. So because of that, if I planted this quite deep, you can see V down there, so the roots, they would grow out and down, but you have all this compost up here which isn't utilised. So the actual growing area, which is just going to be the very bottom half of the pot, and there's going to be a very small amount of soil. The plant's not really going to get enough space for its roots to get enough nutrition, so it's not going to do very well. So we'll plant it quite a lot higher up. That way it'll be sitting about here in the pot, very similar to how I planted my other one here, which sits quite proud of the pot. And that means at this height, most of the roots will go all the way into the soil, and most of the soil will be full of roots instead of just having a small amount. Now, when it comes to the problem of it not flowering, let's say I don't really know why that is. It's not got any rot in it, but my theory is I think what's happened is there's lots of old material here, and it's getting really tight at the neck, and it can't actually grow through because it's too tight. Normally plants can just push their way through, so I'm surprised to see any issues on this. But I'm going to try cutting around here, relieving some of the pressure. Now last year I did slit down the side here. You can see possibly some of this kind of V shape there. That V shape is where I cut it with a knife. I did a little bit here as well. That didn't seem to help it much, but I didn't want to cut too far just in case. But I'm going to go quite drastic this time and basically cut the whole top off the bulb and see if we can see any kind of growth trying to grow up. Can't really see much there. They're just the old leaves, no sign of any new leaves. There is a bit of dead in there as well, so I wonder if something was trying to grow up. I will cut in further again, but I don't want to go too far. But with bulbs, the growing point actually originates at the very base, so you could actually cut more of this off and you won't cut out the growing stem. But the big risk with doing this is you're introducing wounds to the bulb, and then it could start rotting. So I would only do this as last resort. The reason I'm doing it is because it's really not grown or flowered in 2 years, and if it continues like this, it's probably going to die. So that's the top cleaned off there. You can see there is a little bit of a shoot in the middle there trying to grow up. It looks like it might be a leaf. What I will do is I'm also going to cut down the sides here to allow the bulb to expand slightly when it starts to regrow. So using a sharp knife, I'm just going to see where the lines are here. So what tends to happen with most bulbs, and especially the Amaryllis, is you have like leaves coming out on either side. It doesn't seem to spiral around like a lot of plants, just leaf on each side. So the way I want to cut it is down here and down there. If I cut it here, it won't really make a lot of difference. So I'm just wanting to run a slit down a little bit in there. As you can see there, it actually just opened itself up, so there was a lot of tension. It was under a lot of pressure there. Do the same on this side. So I can really feel that the bulb has started to open up after doing that. Now, I can't really see much in there. Just looks like several layers of the leaf. But there's a real risk of infection getting into this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be really careful when replanting it. I'm not going to water it for quite a while. Let these sides dry out before it really gets watered again, because I don't want any infection to get into the bulb, because this is a really easy way for infection to get in there. But the compost I'm going to be using, and if I did have more time, I would probably leave this to dry for several weeks before planting it. But I'm moving house soon, so I need to get this planted up for the move. So the compost I'm going to be using is multi-purpose compost, but quite a lot of perlite added, because they like quite free draining soil, the Amaryllis. If the soil isn't free draining enough, there's a real risk that they could start rotting. So I'm making sure it's free draining with lots of perlite. So I just want to make sure it's about the height that I'm looking for, so I'll put a little bit more in of that compost. And that's about the height I think I'm going to go for. And then I'm just going to carefully pour this compost in, trying to avoid those cut marks as much as possible, because I don't want to cause any infection to get into the bulb. So that's all for my Amaryllis update. This one will be interesting to see how it responds. I'll see if I've got some photos in my photo collection. I can show you how it looked the last couple of years and why I'm doing this. I wouldn't normally cut a bulb like this, but it's a last resort. If I didn't do this, there's a real chance it might die. I just had to do something to try and get this plant back into life, have it growing again. Because it is a decent size, you can see there, it's about the same size as this bulb. It's not as flat, but it's not as wide, but it's got a lot more height to it. So I'm hoping this will flower again, and there's plenty of energy in it for flowering if it needs to. It's just a question of whether it can grow through there now that it's been loosened, and whether the rot will get in and it will die. So I'll give you guys an update in a few weeks' time, and hopefully we'll have some flowers on these two just about to open, and some new growth starting on this without much rot starting to set in.